call to order this meeting of the legislative budget hearings for the Champaign County. Call to order at 6 p.m. I think we have a quorum, so let's have a roll call, please.
Alex. Berkson. Carter. Cowart. Esri. Harper.
Here.
Hartke.
Here.
James.
Here.
Jay. Kibler. Langenheim. Maxwell.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Michaels.
Here.
Mitchell. Petrie.
Here.
Quisenberry. Richards. Rosales.
Here.
Schrader. Schwartz. Kurtz.
Here. We have a quorum. Thank you. One quick announcement. These little units right here in front of us are $2,000 each. All right. Please do not lift them by the stem. We've had a couple that have already cracked off. So please move the microphones by the base. All right. Thank you. I'd like a motion for approval of the agenda, please.
Second.
Stands, second, Mr. Rosales. And we have a change before we make our vote on this. We're switching A and B on your agenda. RPC will be first. The County Board of Health will be second. Also on your agenda, remove letter E for this evening. We're moving letter E to Wednesday evening, A1. There'll be A1 and A2 on your agenda for Wednesday night. Okay? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our budget presentation will start with Regional Planning Commission, Ms. Murphy and Mr. Moore. Please take the table.
Good, thank you. Again, just for introduction purposes, my name is Cameron Moore. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. Also with me tonight is Betty Murphy, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Regional Planning Commission. We appreciate the opportunity to come in tonight and just take a few minutes to sort of walk through the FY14 budget for RPC. As you are all well aware, and I'm sure you'll hear this from lots of other people, but I do want to remind you that this is a 13-month budget because of the switch in fiscal year. So that certainly has created a few challenges in trying to estimate 13 months of expenses, but we'll get through it. Basically, our budget covers 5 major planning commission funds. We have our operating fund, early childhood fund, workforce development fund, economic development fund, and USDA economic development. When you look at our 2014 budget, the proposed budget accommodates about 127 active departments, 9 major program areas. Federal and state grants account for about 89% of our overall revenue. Salary and fringe benefits represent about 65% of our total anticipated expenditures, and that is after we factor out transfer payments and direct client assistance. We do expect our staffing levels for next year to be around 220 to 225. And that is due in some respects because we've lost some funding during the years, but there's a little bit of an increase in employment due primarily to the acquisition of the federal workforce development programs and also some expanded transportation planning grants that we've been able to receive. So one thing I do want to caution everybody about is there is a little bit of uncertainty in our budget in particular because we rely so heavily on state and federal funding. We do not know, frankly, at this point, what the federal budget looks like that is supposed to take effect on October 1st, as an example. So There is a bit of uncertainty in here, but we do our best based on past practice and what we feel may happen, at least at state and federal levels. I do want to just walk quickly through the funds I mentioned. The operating fund is projected to be stable in 2014. We lost some money in some areas. We picked some up in other areas. So it's relatively stable compared to the previous year. And some of the, I'm not going to talk about all these, but we've had a very successful year in terms of picking up transportation-related funding and grants. In your budget detail, those are detailed, and there are quite a number of them. So that has really helped us out this year as we've lost money in Head Start, for instance, and some other program areas. Our operating fund revenue, we're projecting, again, 13-month revenue, about $14.8 million in the operating fund. And we do expect a positive year-end fund balance in the operating fund. And, you know, we do have cash flow needs, reimbursement rates, timeframes between when we expend money and when we receive it, et cetera, that sort of dictates what we feel our prudent fund balance level should be. And in particular, we have seen, as you probably have too, significant delays in state reimbursements. That's been an ongoing problem now for the last few years. We don't expect that to get a whole lot better, so we have to factor that into our budget and our budget planning. I want to talk briefly about the Early Childhood Fund. We actually are projecting pretty stable funding in there. We've lost some funding in some areas. We expect to pick a little bit up in some other areas. And however, the sequestration funding reductions we took, which was 5.27%, translates to about $258,000. At least as of today, we have no reason to believe that that money's coming back. We're looking at that as a permanent cut going forward. Obviously, that could change depending upon the actions of Congress, but we have to look at that as it's a permanent cut. There's been no indication that it will change. Also want to talk briefly about the Workforce Development Fund. This was a new addition to the programs at RPC. We became, a technical term, I guess, is the grant recipient and fiscal agent for the Workforce Investment Act. That is the federal legislation that funds these programs. That occurred in October 1st of last year. So we are not yet through our first full year of administering these programs. But we are projecting for the 13-month budget for next year, revenue and expenses of about $2.8 million in that fund. And again, those funds are really designed to help economically disadvantaged, unemployed individuals who face, you know, serious barriers to employment to become productively employed. And obviously, you can think about the fact that that has lots of benefits if it's done successfully. Certainly improves the quality of the local workforce, which is an important factor in economic development decisions. We hope it reduces welfare dependency and improves the productivity and competitiveness of our area. So again, if we do our job well, things get better for a lot of people. The next fund I want to talk about briefly is the Economic Development Fund. This is primarily where we have our loan programs that we operate. You know, this has been a challenging fund the last few years. I think everybody's aware of the recession that hit late 2008, early 2009. Frankly, ever since then, I think anybody that lends money to businesses have had some challenging times, and we're no different. We have had some challenges. I don't know that I see a lot of growth in that particular fund this year. Although I will say that in the last 6 months or so, it seems that there finally is a little bit of uptick in demand for business financing. But frankly, there were a couple of years there where it was difficult for us to give a loan away. There just wasn't anybody that wanted any money to take that risk, given the uncertainties of what was going on in the economy. So we are projecting the year-end fund balance there to be about $6.3 million. And again, that's not cash, and I hopefully be clear about that. We would have loans receivable of about $4.2 million, so we'd still have roughly $2 million or so that would be available to lend. And again, those are our projections for year-end next year. The last one I want to talk about, fund, just briefly, is the USDA Economic Development Fund. Again, I know we have some new county board members. This is a relatively new program, although we've had it a couple of years now. What this program is essentially it's $1 million loan fund, but the way we came up with that $1 million is we borrowed $750,000 from USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. We got pretty good rates and terms on that. It's 30 years at 1%, so it's pretty good money. We matched that with $250,000 of local money for a total fund of $1 million. Again, we just made our first loan out of that a couple of months ago, so it's been sort of slow going because we happened to open that fund right at the time when demand for business financing pretty much went away for a period of years. So, but we are hoping that this year we will continue to make loans out of that. The important thing about this program is it is targeted only to rural areas. So we can make loans in a 6-county region and in any community of 25,000 or less. We cannot loan these funds, for instance, in Champaign or Urbana, places like that. So this is a rural program, and that's what it is really focused on. And again, we hope to make some more loans in there this year. Just briefly to kind of get into a little bit more detail, which Betty will talk about regarding impacts on the county budget directly. For fiscal year 2014, we do anticipate that we'll maintain our administrative expenses at about 7% of our operating budget. As I mentioned before, most of our revenue comes from state and federal grants. They do have limits as to how much money you can use for administration. For federal grants, it's 15%. For state grants, it's 20%. At 7%, we are very, very competitive in terms of our ability to bring additional grants in. The other thing that you all know about, I'm sure, as you're planning your budgets is we do expect that fringe benefit expenses are going to increase this year, primarily due to health insurance. I guess we're still waiting to sort of get, final numbers to be exactly where we're going to be at with that. But that is an area where we anticipate seeing increased expenses, and they could be significant. So just to kind of quickly summarize, I think RPC is in good shape. I frankly, a couple of years ago, would have thought that we would have seen a little bit more decline in our budget over the last couple of years than we have. But we do research and write grants, if not every day, probably every week during the year, and that's sort of what allows us to continue to keep ourselves afloat and grow a little bit as we move forward. I'm going to turn this over to Betty Murphy just to kind of quickly talk about impacts directly on the county budget in terms of the expense side, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
So in your budget document on Roman numeral page 6, I've identified the annualized and the 13-month budgetary impacts that are specific to Champaign County contracts, and I'd like to go through those just briefly. As you're all aware, the Champaign County planning contract for professional services has been budgeted at $73,360, which is a 2% increase, and I believe the work plan has already been submitted and approved by this group. Champaign County's portion of the RPC membership dues for 2014 is budgeted at $20,353, which represents a nearly 6% decrease because of the decrease in population in the unincorporated areas of the county. The RPC membership fees have a base and then a per capita. That's the formula we use for membership fees. Matching funds for the senior services program is budgeted at $22,470, which represents a 1% increase. These local matching funds leverage over $100,000 in state and federal funding for senior services programming. Champaign County support for QOTS through the Highway Department totals $28,978, and that's a 5% increase. We've been really fortunate in the area of transportation, planning, and engineering and research, and this will leverage over $700,000 in federal and state funding for the county. Champaign County's support for the court diversion project is budgeted at $164,500, which represents a 2.2% increase from the prior year. We also received new federal juvenile justice and delinquency prevention funds to again leverage the local money and enhance our court diversion and mediation strategies. And finally, the police training budget is through the Sheriff's Department is budgeted at $7,701, which is a 5% increase, and this leverages over $400,000 in state funding for law enforcement personnel training. And with that, Cam and I will take questions.
Ms. Schwartz.
I'm not sure if you mentioned, I think you skipped it. Why is there a 0% change in the court diversion coming from mental health?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
On the same page you're talking about, the court diversion, not the one that comes from public safety, but the one that comes from mental health, has a 0% increase. Why is that?
I don't know that I have an answer for that.
I mean,
but
are
we'll
you
get
who's budgeting that?
So the court diversion, we're up in the planning stages of opening a community assessment center at 402 North Randolph, which will provide 24/7 court diversion services. And so we're utilizing the quarter from the public safety tax, combined with $26,000 from the mental health board, and now the juvenile justice delinquency prevention. And we think we're going to be able to provide a 24/7 service to juveniles in the county, and that's a new initiative for us. Whether we can do that or not, we don't know, but so far, this looks very promising.
So you're saying you can do that without any, I mean, everything else seems to have increased, either inflation rate or a little bit more, and this one is the only one that's flat. And I'm wondering why.
We think at this point that we have the funding to do that. Again, this expansion that Betty talked about is sort of a community effort, and for instance, we're getting free space. Unit 4 is providing free space, City of Champaign's paying the utilities. So really, our obligation of this is just to provide staffing, which we kind of already do. So it's not a huge increase in expenditures for us.
Ms. Murphy, when you speak, just pull the base over towards you, so not by the base. Thank you. That's it. Just move it over towards you when you speak. Mr. Alex?
I think the question there is who sets that level of funding from the mental health board? Does that come from the mental health board, or does that come from you?
We put in a request like anybody else, and then they determine how much funding we get.
And did you request more than 26,000?
Yes, a little bit more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Kibler?
Thank you for your diligent responses to my questions late last night and early this morning. Specifically with the early childhood fund balance, granted it's outside of the purview of page 6, I completely understand now that the reason why we have such a massive cash reserve is just to maintain cash flow over the course of, let's say, 6 months in case we get into arrears from the state. It would be good in the budget to indicate that, just so that we have, there's a 6-month, I know you indicate it via text, but there's no solid number that says this is 6 months of cash reserve. So just a recommendation. This is the only thing I have left. So I appreciate your
Good
responses.
suggestion, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Maxwell?
On items, senior services, membership services, where do those funds come from? I suspect the corporate fund, but I haven't looked at the corporate fund budget close enough to see.
That would be a question for Deb.
Those two come from the corporate fund.
Any other questions for RPC? Ms. Michaels?
Sorry. Got to get back to my question page here. Let's see. With the Economic Development Fund, I saw that you had money set aside for bad debt, reserved for bad debt and that type of thing, which is normal. But I just wondered what percentage of delinquency are you at? And is what you have going to cover that, or do you foresee more coming? Or do you think that people are finally starting to pay a little by little here so we can get that off of there?
I would tell you, yes, I think the amount we have in there is adequate this year. I don't think it's been adequate with the past couple of years, and we've ended up with greater losses than we anticipated. We have worked very hard in the last year and a half or so to get very detailed arms around and fingers in everything in our loan portfolio, and so that number is reflective of those loans that we're pretty sure we're not going to get paid on.
Okay.
Ms. Bergson?
Is this 161,000 from the public safety tax, is that a new request, something that hasn't come out of the public safety tax before?
No.
No. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Dr. Peterson's here yet.
Is
so why
Dr.
don't you-
Peterson's not here yet? All right, we're gonna,
So go to
we're gonna
Rob.
delay that until Dr. Peterson arrives. Let's move on to C, Mental Health Board, DD Funds, Delinquency Prevention Grants, and Access Initiative.
Thank you. For those, I'm Peter Tracy, the Executive Director of the Champaign County Mental Health Board and the Developmental Disability Board. We have a few people here tonight that I would like to introduce. We have the President of the Mental Health Board, and that's Dr. Dolores Henry. We have the President of the Developmental Disabilities Board, Elaine Palencia, and then Sue Suter, who's a member of the Developmental Disabilities Board. And then Tracy Parsons and some stakeholders that are involved with the Access Initiative are here also. We basically are going to be talking about the funds that, the 5 funds, the Mental Health Board, the Developmental Disability Board, the Delinquency Prevention, which we also call the Quarter Cent for Public Safety, Access Initiative, and then the Drug Court Fund, which we also manage. Just to start with the Mental Health Board, the major things that the budget highlights, I think, kind of tell it all. One of the things that we've been working very hard on is the issues that have been raised concerning the people that are involved with the criminal justice system that also have mental health issues. And you're all familiar, of course, with the Kalmanoff report. And what we've attempted to do is to work with our primary providers to redirect some of the existing funding, and we added an additional $100,000 in funding. So we have almost $600,000 tied either directly or slightly indirectly to addressing the issues of those folks. And at this point, we haven't finalized the contracts, but there's been negotiation that's been going on, and I think it's getting close to being finished at this point. And I'll be happy to give you more details on that if you're interested at some point. The other major things on the mental health board side is that we want to continue the Parenting with Love and Limits, which is the evidence-based practice that we have that serves approximately 200 youth that are involved in the criminal justice system. We also this year have engaged in a memorandum of understanding with United Way for implementation of the 211 system. Previously, we funded several information and referral programs, and we've reduced the funding or eliminated funding and partnered with United Way to do 211, which is essentially if you have a non-emergency, you want to get information about social services or human services, you dial 211, that it goes to a agency in Bloomington, Illinois, and then they direct the person to the appropriate agency here in Champaign County. And they also track all of this information, so we'll have good data about who's calling what and asking for what. And again, that's we have a formal agreement with them, and we actually split the costs right down the middle. We are also working. We're going to be going into the 5th year of the Access Initiative process, the cooperative agreement. And that whole thing is, at this point, we're looking at the sustainability planning, what's going to happen as the thing winds down. We get less money. the last 2 years, and then how do we sustain what we have built in the post-cooperative agreement period. And then lastly, I wanted to remind you of that a number of things that we do relate to intergovernmental agreements or memoranda of understanding between us and Champaign County. We manage the Delinquency Prevention Fund. We also manage the Drug Court Fund. And both of those, by the way, we do without any charge. We take no administration fee for doing that.
Peter?
Yes.
Quick question on the drug court. I was talking with Judge Ford. It seems that some of the funding, federal funding, state funding, is going to end in September. What are the plans for keeping that program moving?
Well, I believe that they have applied to use, I'm not sure if it's carryover money, but there's some additional funding that they have applied to from the feds, and I haven't heard, I think that they anticipate getting it. So we should be okay in the next year.
Okay.
And then we have to look at, how, at this point, there is money building up in the fund that, they can look at how to program, and of course, they can apply for funding from us.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. The Developmental Disabilities Board is the next major fund. And
Peter, 1 second, we have a
Yeah.
question. Mr. Kibler?
Sorry, Mr. Tracy, I didn't know if we were going to do each one at a time or if we were just to skip over. So I want a quick question on the Mental Health Board. With respect to the fund balance, it's indicated that we try to maintain a fund balance that assures adequate cash flow, completely understand, as well as obligations. But what is the actual goal that we want to have? Because having $2 million in the bank out of a $4 million budget is a very hefty fund balance. And I just want to make sure that the programs we may want to seek or want to make sure we can fund have adequate funding. And this seems like a healthy pot of cash that you may.
Well, it's actually, this is a kind of a point-in-time number. So if you look at it over the course of the year, we can be as high as about $3 million or $2 to $3 million, and as low as about $400,000. And so it varies. And we do I have a projection model. We do, on a month-by-month basis, and we do the current year plus the 2 out years, and I anticipate how much revenue we're going to get and what the administration expenses are and how much we're going to be paying out in contribution for grants to service providers. So we, that $2 million is not what we have in the bank all the time. It goes way down.
So in that case, great explanation. If you could add that to the fund balance goal line, just to indicate that we get as low as this and this, that would be helpful, just to make sure we're not just sitting on a pot of cash. 'Cause
Okay.
this
That's a good idea.
seems like it is that way, but it's really not, so, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
Mr. Tracy,
Yes.
I'm still going to stay with you. I'm not hearing about the facilities for mental health. What are we doing about that?
With regard to the criminal justice piece, you mean?
No, that's one thing we need to separate the mental health from criminal justice. That's one bad point we have. And the next one, we need to be making sure that we get a facility to serve mental health.
Mr. Carter, Peter Tracy is on the Mental Health Board and really doesn't have that facilities. Facilities will be taken care of. Are you talking about the justice system and the facilities like the downtown jail? Is that what you're?
I believe Mr. Carter and I have had a conversation about this, and he
I
was
would
talking
appreciate
about
that.
he's talking about state-operated facilities for people that have mental health issues or developmental disability issues. For example, Kankakee State Hospital was formerly, took a lot of people from this area, and Mr. Carter believes that there is a need for some more intensive services for people that need that level of care.
I agree. Thank you. I
And
wasn't sure where you were heading on that.
I
Thank
would
you.
appreciate your conversation with me, too.
You come on to me, my door's always open to you, Mr. Carter.
Then maybe I wouldn't have to get on Mr. Parsons. So.
Mr. Kibble.
So since you are, you're going to be overseeing several of these, I'll just kind of mention it once, just because I'll hit almost everybody on it. I'm a big person on key performance indicators and making sure that the money that's being provided to these funds is going to the causes that they're intended to be and what sort of result comes out of them. For instance, on your KPIs is that Parenting with Love and Limits, while a great program, the key performance indicator is that we have a max of 228 youth. It doesn't indicate how many youth we actually get through the system. It could be 0, it could be 50. What we're saying is there a max of 228. Having more clearly defined measurable goals so that we can determine is this money truly impacting the lives of our youth or the lives of anybody that's receiving this programming. A focus on key performance indicators would be very, very helpful. And this really goes for everybody, not just you. Everybody is the same way. So,
Well, I kind of struggled with this a bit when we were doing this. One of the things I would mention to you is that when you look at the contract lines, and, you know, we have in the neighborhood of 40 contracts from the Mental Health Board, each one of those has a section where we define the key performance indicators. And so, for example, with the Parenting with Love and Limits you use as an example, it includes things like the percentage of clients that engage in the program, the percentage of clients that complete the program, the functional behavioral improvement based on the different rating scales they use. So, I mean, that kind of information is available, but this would have been a very long document if I would have pulled all that out. And we'd be happy to share that with you at any time.
I'm ecstatic that that's the case. What I'd recommend then is under key performance indicators, specifically for this one example you provided of Parenting with Love and Limits, you say further KPIs can be found here and publish those on a website or publish them somewhere so that if someone really wants to dig deep, they can determine how we're doing with these respective programs and meeting our goals.
Okay.
So they don't need to be on the budget per se, but at least a link or something that tells where they are.
Okay. That's a good suggestion. Thank you. Yes.
Hi. If
Ms.
I
Michaels.
can add to that, kind of coupling what he did, and I saw this too, as we go through this budget, you want to make sure that you're impacting a pretty good amount of people with the service too, because you don't want to have one service only go for a select few when it really could help more. And so, like he said on these others, I know, I've got that noted in several, and you just happen to have one of those type of programs that does affect people a little differently than the other. But I was most concerned that if you will, in a short form, getting the most bang for our buck to the youth and the people that are in need of the services instead of just a few. And so performance indicator, meaning how much are we spending per person? Is that too much? Is that not enough? And what are they getting for it? And is it successful is important, because I too went on the websites and tried to find stuff and they're months old on some of them, so.
Well, that's a,
Because
you
you
know,
want to get your grant money back again.
that's a difficult, you know, it is difficult to nail that down because there are different levels of intensity. You know, like if we have a lot of prevention programs, and if you take those numbers and try to add those to the mix of people that get like, you know, intensive outpatient services or something, you know, it doesn't quite balance. So there's, you know, there is a level of difficulty or intensity that plays into it. And I can assure you that both of my boards, and they're behind me now, are very interested in the same thing, getting the most bang for our buck and also making sure that we serve as many people as we can, so.
Well, especially since, if I can continue real quick, you know, we look at delinquency next and going into that and some of these other preventive things and the loving, you know, those are items that, through the school system too, that we need to make sure that we work with, because I noticed that there is no money on here, and if you go to that next, if you could explain that, kind of couples in here.
I'm sorry, which one?
Page 33
Page
kind of
thir-
goes in with this helping kids and making sure they're getting what they need.
Well, this, on page 33, you're talking about the delinquency prevention grants, and that, at this point, as our friends from RPC mentioned, they get 164,000 of that. Basically, it's really all of our money. We are in the process now of, we're going to be amending that contract since they're opening this assessment center as soon as we get approval from we have an administrative team that sort of oversees this. Julia Reitz, the state's attorney, is on this team, and several other key players in Champaign County. So virtually all the money that we have is going to be going to support this assessment center and the delinquency prevention stuff that RPC is doing, plus the additional 26,000 that Ms. Swartz mentioned, that is additional money. And actually, where that money came from is that was originally money we gave to RPC to help support their program for the elderly, the senior programs that they had. And when they discontinued doing the seniors programs, they asked for permission to just take that 26,000 and reprogram it for the delinquency prevention stuff. And so that's why it was moved, and that's why it didn't change.
Ms. Petrie?
Mr. Tracy and I have had this conversation before, and I've gone before both boards with the following concern. My definition of the biggest bang for the buck is not numbers of 248 children or something like that. Mine is effectiveness. And when I started on the journey with the Criminal Community Justice Task Force to learn about the various programs in the community, no program has any data that tells you about the effectiveness of the program. It gives me numbers of maybe how many people are there, but no effectiveness, and effectiveness needs to be measured by people randomly assigned to the program to see if in fact the program works or if another program will work. And this continues to be the case, and I have tremendous concerns that this huge pot of money, I mean, I've added up the money, it's over $8 million just without the Access Initiative monies, and there is no documentation that shows us the amount of money that's being spent on programs. It's not all that $8 million because you have overheads of various kinds. But what are we successfully accomplishing for the monies that are being spent and provided for these various programs? And I say the same thing in relationship to when the ILPP report comes back with the suggestions in that report for various programs. I'm 100% in support of the programs with the caveat that we have got to start building in true, valid, and reliable evaluations of what's happening.
Well, just to comment, that's not quite right, Patsy. The PLL program, we have an independent researcher, and they did in fact do a control, they looked at, well, that's not, but they all have, the Access Initiative, 20% of what we do with Access is for the evaluation that's done by the University of Illinois.
Ms. Petrie, if you're going to respond,
That
please.
is part of getting the money. That's not voluntarily doing it.
Well, all I can tell you is the same answer is virtually every contract has performance indicators, and we look at efficacy of programs as well as how many people are served. Some of the performance goals that we have, depending on the program, can be things like that I would call process goals, like how many of these clients did you engage, because that's an important factor with some populations. How many you engage? Did they get better? That's another question then. But most of the programs we have performance goals that are attached to them, and virtually all of them use some sort of an objective tool to measure the effectiveness of the program and how it's worked. But PLL is actually is really the best because they actually had an independent researcher look at over 4,000 cases, and so they have a control group based on the 4,000 cases. And
Can't hear you, Ms. Petrie.
I do know about the process with PLL, and they do have a control group. My concern is that the others don't.
Yeah.
And so validity, reliability cannot be there without that methodology.
Mr. Alex? Ms. Schwartz?
It's actually a question that's pretty general for most of the funds. considering it's a 13-month budget, I don't see 2014 being that much higher than 2013 to reflect an extra month. So I understand that the revenues are not 13 months, but it seems like you're matching the expenses with the revenue. So how is that going to work in terms of providing services for 13 months?
Well, my understanding, this does reflect 13 months. We actually are getting less money, especially on the Developmental Disability Board side than we had previously. So that probably impacts, makes the whole picture look less. And we also got less money on the Mental Health Board side too. So I don't have anything. I mean, it is a 13-month budget, though. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit confused about that. You're showing, I mean, you're showing an increase in property tax, a small increase in property tax receipts from last year, which we'd expect, right? I mean, you get growth in that tax levy. Sorry, I'm on the DDB. On
Okay.
page 25, the DDB. I mean, at the top of the page there, you show 3.6 million in property tax for the DDB levy, as opposed to 3.58 from last year, so, a modest increase. But the expenditure totals are exactly the same as the revenue totals. You're only getting the property tax payment once in the 13 months, but the expenditures have to cover, you're basically getting one slug of revenue and have to cover 13 months. So I'd expect to see a decrease in the fund balance to account for the fact you're providing 13 months of services with only 12 months of income, and then in the subsequent fiscal year, I'd expect to see the opposite, where or not the opposite, but I would expect it to stabilize.
Mr. Tracy, do
yes.
you pay the granting agencies on a monthly basis? Are they paid every month, or are they paid differently?
Well, they are mostly paid every month, except, so for the most part, every month. I'm not sure, to be honest, I don't know how to answer your question. I can check on that, but
I mean, I think it's between you and Deb, but we need to identify, I mean, we're going to have this is going to be an issue we're going to have with a lot of departmental budgets, is determining accurately that they're properly accounting for the timing of revenues and expenses in a sort of 12 months of income, 13 months of expenses type scenario.
Right.
And I'm not sure, I mean, I understand why property taxes is the same, because we only get two property tax payments a year. But I would expect the fact that the fund balance is the same to the dollar. I mean, I understand you're spending everything, your job is spending what you take, or your budget is to spend what you take in. But I would expect to see 13 months of expenses rather than what appears to be 12.
And I can affirm that there are 13 months of personnel expenses in the Mental Health Board budget, and we can work on whether or not that is appropriately budgeted for the programming, because you're right, with the property tax only fund, we would have anticipated that the fund balance would drop by 8% or the equivalent of 1 month with this budget.
Well, if I take last year's number and multiply it by 13/12ths, I come up with about 3.8 million, not 3.6 million.
Mr. Maxwell?
Thank you. Perhaps, Deb, you can help me with this. Both these boards have their own tax levy, have their own appointed boards, set their budgets. I believe we as a county board adopt them. We might even adopt them, but we extend their levy. So how much really say in this process do we have as a county board?
Well, you do extend the levy, you have to approve that, and you also have to approve the budgets ultimately that are presented to you by those boards, because it's part of the entire Champaign County budget.
And you also appoint the boards.
Right, and you appoint the boards too.
Mr. Richards, you had your hand up? Yeah.
Peter, the Mental Health Board is moving a little bit more towards looking at mental health with the criminal justice system. I think this is going to be the first full fiscal year on this initiative. Maybe it's just starting this fiscal year. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, as I mentioned, we we identified the contracts that we have with primarily Community Elements, but also with Prairie Center, and that were currently related to this population, and that included even some like Time Center, which is, has a relationship. We identified those contracts, and we basically told the provider, and this was working in conjunction with us and also the sheriff and his staff, to look at what they could do with the money we have, by what they could do to reprogram the money to more effectively serve these folks that are involved with the criminal justice system. And in addition, we had about $100,000 in new money that we were able to put in. So that combination of the redirection of effort and the new money is what we based this whole process on. The major components that of what we have negotiated with the providers include a tracking system so that they will know immediately or on the next day of any admissions to the jail, so that they can identify people that they know that have had involvement with, that have a mental health involvement. There's also a deflection process, and that is in addition to the money that we put in, interestingly, Community Elements was able to get a Donated Funds Initiative grant. So they're going to be working with that Community Resource Center at the hospital. And we're hoping that many of the clients that are known to the system would be dropped off at the resource center and then get crisis intervention or other kinds of supports to keep them out of the jail. So that's the deflection piece. A third major area is something that is called, this is going to get confusing because you've probably heard the term wraparound or WRAP. There's also an adult WRAP process, and that is the Wellness Response Planning. I've forgotten what the A stands for. Wellness Response Action Plan, I believe it's called. And that's like you're probably familiar with the concept of the advanced directive, which is when you have a person that has an illness, it defines what happens if they're incapacitated. Well, there's a similar thing that they do in psychiatry or in mental health, where you have a person that has recurrent episodes and re-involvement with the system. Many of the high flyers that Dr. Kalmanoff talked about were those kind of folks. In this situation, what the mental health the Community Elements and Prairie Center is going to do is work up a WRAP plan with all of these roughly 40 frequent flyer people, so that when they're functioning at their highest level, they can sort of talk about what they will do the next time they have a recurrence of whatever their issue is. And so they will essentially, instead of when they're presented at the Community Resource Center, instead of being presented cold and no one knowing anything about them, and then they end up in the jail, everybody will know about them. The mental health folks will know. They'll have a plan for each one of these people, and and that plan can include providing medication. Basically, they assign it. The idea is they sign an agreement that they know that when they stop taking their medication, their functioning levels go down. So the idea would be they would sign permission to give them medication in that kind of situation. So those are the major areas. In addition, the sheriff, I've got some documents here I'll be happy to give you. The sheriff, CHC, that's the mental health provider at the jail, and Community Elements have signed a memorandum of understanding about how they operate. So they now have defined the relationship between all the different kind of moving parts, so that hopefully they will work more effectively at this point.
This deflection piece of this, is this the initiative we had talked about involving the Prairie Center?
Prairie Center would be part of it, but it's primarily using that Community Resource Center at the hospital and some Prairie Center staff and some Community Element staff. Again, this is not, we do not have final documents on this yet, so I don't have protocols as to how that's all going to play out, but I'm actually meeting with Community Elements and Prairie Center this week to discuss where they stand at this point.
Mr. Carter?
Mr. Chairman, that's what Mr. Parson and Mr. Trace and I have been talking about. That's the conversation.
That's great. Thank you. Ms. Petrie? Oh, are you giving out some? Okay.
Before I ask my questions, they are sort of macro questions that cover all of these funds. Did you want to finish going through the rest of the funds? And
Sure, I
then-
can do
And then
that.
I can ask my questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I hope there's enough copies. I'm passing around some documents related to the negotiation and that kind of lay out some of the things I just described to you. Again, those are nothing is final there. With regard to the Developmental Disability Board, there's a couple things I want to mention. We are having a public hearing in September at the library where we're inviting people as well, our legislators will be there as well as our boards, and we're inviting people to come and give testimony concerning what they see as the primary issues with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. And then the other things that we're going to be focusing on, employment is going to be a huge focus this year. We are actually, we've made some changes in the contracts, and I anticipate in the coming year, there will be even more. There was a law passed by the Illinois General Assembly called Employment First. And nationally, there's really a movement to kind of move away from the sheltered workshops into and have competitive employment be what everybody works toward. And so that's going to be an area, and that change could happen very quickly. We've got our contracts organized so that if there is a change in the law, actually there's several lawsuits that could force immediate changes in terms of how employment services and developmental training services are offered. And so we're kind of positioned to address those as they come up. The other major area of emphasis is on self-determination and person-centered planning. We are really moving toward defining the funding by individuals and having the funding follow individuals as opposed to be following programs. And so instead of funding programs, we're going to be looking at the individuals that are served. And those are really the major areas of emphasis, I think, for the Developmental Disability Board at this point. The delinquency prevention, I think we've kind of talked about that. The creating the assessment center is one of the primary things. There's been a lot of people involved in that, and that is not final. We kind of have a presentation. There was a proposal from RPC's folks that we're going to be reviewing next week. And if it's good to go, we'll be amending the contract to implement at that point. Access initiative, we have, as I mentioned, we're going into the 5th year, starting in October. It ends at the 6th year. Our major focus is going to be on how do we maintain what we've done? How do we sustain the changes that we've made in this community? We have a number of things going on. Actually, it was interesting today. We had a meeting with Healthcare and Family Services. Tracy Parsons and I met with them, and they are looking at doing a pilot project in Champaign. Actually, Champaign, Vermilion, Ford, and Iroquois are the target counties. And we think that what we've done with Access, they're very interested in Access because everything they want to do with this pilot project is the same stuff that we're already doing with Access. So it could be another way to sustain our project, especially on the wraparound piece. And then let's see, the drug court fund. We continue to we manage the money. Most of that money is contracted with Prairie Center. And what drives the contract with Prairie Center is there is an administrative team for the drug court that makes recommendations. They've set the criteria for how that money can be used. And so we really don't do much with that other than we're part of the team, and we try to do what we can to support Judge Ford.
Mr. Kibler?
You're right where I want to talk about, because we just were handed this tonight, so apologies if we're kind of a little delayed on drug courts program grant. What causes the sudden drop-off in the drug courts program grant? And what makes your team responsible for that amount of budget? Since you just mentioned that some of it's given to you and others get other monies, like what causes you to have $100,000 last year, but then $36,000 this year?
I'm sorry, with drug court?
Drug court program grant.
Oh, okay.
Just kind of curious, it doesn't really explain in the budget highlights why it fluctuates so much.
Well, most of this is the fund, which is tied to the fees that are assessed, related to traffic fines. And that's really the money I'm talking about, other than we also have the federal grant, which was alluded to earlier, which is going away. And most of that money was used to pay for the drug court coordinator position and some other things. So for the most part, other than accept the money and work with Prairie Center to respond to the questions that the feds have, we don't really have a whole lot to do with it because it's all really done by Judge Ford's team. Nothing happens without his kiss of approval.
Okay. It may be worthwhile then to put in the budget highlights the drop in federal funding. I think that's what you were alluding to, Mr. Kurtz, earlier, in the highlights, just so in case anybody's looking at it later, they can say, oh, well, the drop is due to lack of federal funding.
You're right, and that was an oversight. I apologize for that.
Ms. Schwartz?
My question is about the Access Initiative. I know there are some matching requirements.
Yes.
What specifically are we obligated to match or to fund in the
Well,
next few years?
Yeah,
I mean, I know some of it is by providing the positions, but positions cost money. So even though you're not specifically putting money into something, maybe you're just funding, I don't know, however many positions, it still costs money. So what exactly are we legally obligated in terms of what commitments are coming up that may not show up right now, but I need to think about?
Right. Well, at this point, we submitted a plan as part of, the match plan as part of the year 5 budget that we submitted to the state, which they submitted to the feds. The major components of the match plan are about $1.2 million in contracts that go to support what we're doing with Access. About roughly 780,000, somewhere between 750 and 800,000 is PLL. That's what the total cost of PLL is with the 2 contracts we have with Prairie Center.
What is PLL?
I'm sorry, Parenting with Love and Limits.
Okay, thank you. I just, for the record.
Right. So that is a big match component, and then we also have roughly another 500,000 in various contracts of mental health board money that support a variety of other programs that are part of the Access Initiative plan. In addition, we have some what I would describe as indirect match that has been approved for use, and we have a number of contracts where, as part of the RAP process, we've had terms and conditions added to the contracts which require the agency that we contract with to support the wraparound process if they're asked to send staff to be part of the wraparound planning process and to prioritize Access clients for services. And as an example of that, we on the developmental disability and intellectual disability side, the early intervention program that we fund through DSC's Family Development Center, we're allowed to count that as match, and it's around $600,000. So basically, and that's kind of an indirect. The other, so those are the major the contracts. My time, we count about 10% of my time. We are giving some free office space. The city of Champaign, for the community coalition, we're going to be able to count that money, as well as some of the other projects that the city of Champaign does, like the Garden Hills project, where we anticipate that all those things are going to be included or added. And then we have a number of memoranda of understanding that are going to be that are not in place now, that have to do with training agencies to provide trauma-informed care, which is one of the huge areas that the feds and the state are interested in. And that pretty well covers the match piece at this point.
So the short version of that is how much money is the county obligated to put in directly or indirectly? I don't mean like your salary will pay either way, so I don't consider that. I mean, we can allocate part of it or not, but that's not really additional cost. But indirectly, I mean, in terms of maybe not directly cash flows, but cash going to fund positions. So how much money are we talking about? And if you happen to know where it comes from, is it general corp? Is it the mental health?
None of it is, it's all from the Mental Health Board.
Okay, so it comes from the mental health
It's
levy.
about 1.2 million in direct contracts and roughly another 700,000 in those, it was probably more like 800,000 in ancillary contracts where we've added language and they've approved that we can use those contracts as match.
Okay, so since the levy is not going to change and our matching will probably have to increase, I would assume, to make up for what's not coming in, does that mean we're going to start diverting funds from other uses of that tax to the access, or am I wrong about it?
Well, we're actually at the high point in match and it's going to be going down. So we will have no problem with match just with our regular contracts for the last year of the project.
Ms. Michaels?
I have a question here. As I'm looking at this, and this is year 5 of 6, can you tell me approximately how many employees, full, part, whatever? Most of the others gave an FTE on here, and I didn't see that.
Well, we do, actually, all of the employees would be employees of people we contract with. And
Okay.
I don't really know the exact number.
Well, it seems like there's a big, going from 172.9 on the flat, not with including benefits, but going from 172.9 to 99, I would
What
wonder
page are you
if you
on?
would be, I'm on page 37. I'm just looking at base salary, not benefits and that type of thing, because you know those go up no matter what. And as you said, it's winding down. Going from 172 and 12
Yeah.
to 89 and then back up to 99 here. I didn't understand that as this is winding down and there's only a year left. And then another part of this is if this is winding down, then what happens to those programs when you no longer have these funds? And I don't know that the Mental Health Board, maybe you know better than I do, of course, where they would pick up the programs that may not be funded, which is potential, could happen. And, you know, we certainly don't want to add any more staff if we don't have to, because then that throws the rest of the Mental Health Board budget out of whack.
Right. Well, what you've identified is, you know, we originally, the first year of this, all of the employees of the Access Initiative worked for the county. Beginning in year 2, when we began to have services being provided, we had to spin those off to contracts because statutorily, the Mental Health Board
Right.
cannot provide direct services. So at that point, we began, we had contracts with Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club, Best Interest of Children, the Rantoul SOAR program, a number of contracts were initiated, and the staff that worked here, and Prairie Center was another one, went to those agencies under contract. And so at this point, that 172 that you, probably, that was when we were down to the last 3 employees, I think.
In year 3.
And now we're down to where we only have Tracy Parsons, and that's why, that's his number. That would be his salary and his fringes, and that's the only thing you see. Everything else is in the contracts that we have with private agencies in the community.
Well, if I can follow, I guess what I see too is as we're looking at, you know, the social injustice situations and trying to help youth and, you know, I just had a regional office meeting too, so I'm just really hot on making sure we have money to try to keep kiddos in school and doing what they need to do and give them the tools that they need to try to stay that way. And so when you see some of these programs potentially going away, you wonder what's going to happen to them, what are going to happen to the kids, and where is that going to be, you know, taken up for, because there is no more money
Well-
anywhere. It can't just go away. Or are you looking now to combine or move that into a different
Well, we're looking at a number.
collaboration, if you will?
Yes, we're looking at a number of things. The two major, I guess what I would describe as the service components would be the high-fidelity wraparound and PLL. We're going to maintain PLL, that's Parenting with Love and Limits. That's not going away, so that will be there. We can't sustain the high-fidelity wraparound at the same level. There's just no way that we can do
Right.
that. So what is likely to happen is that we will use that money that the Mental Health Board has put into a number of programs, and we'll have to plan for how that would be used to do some level of wraparound. Now, the HFS discussion, healthcare and family service discussion we had this morning, offered a glimmer of hope that we might be in a position to continue it at the same level or even an expanded level with this managed care company that they're going to be bringing in, because they want to buy those services. They want everything in the four-county area to be based on high-fidelity wraparound planning. And there is no one else that does that other than Access Initiative. So, I think it's a very good opportunity for us that could really help us with, and it kind of comes from nowhere, too, because I was thinking that we would have to really reduce the wraparound portion of
Well,
the.
and at this point, as I see this as year 5, I mean, you've really got 1 year to make arrangements to take care of things, or eliminate them, or combine them with things that are already existing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be caught short doing that, because I don't think there's going to be as much money later on either.
Right.
Diane, one point, you were talking 89 to 99, 89,000 to 99,000 went up, that's 13 months from now. They're up to 10,000 extra.
I know that,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I know. He said, where were you? And I said, right there on that line, yeah.
Mr. Kibler?
Quick question. With respect to the Access Initiative grant expenditures, you're dropping about 30% from last year, but again, we're going from 12 months to 13 months. But the amount of contracts for services, at least as you measure on page 42, is staying the same. Is the idea to pay less per program, or is the idea, or is that metric off? Are we going to do fewer can't even speak, contracts for services this time around, or are they just going to get less money?
I believe there's just going to be less money. That's one of the things that, I know that Mr. Parsons has been working on with the providers, is looking at how as the money decreases, reducing, making sure that we have enough money in the contracts to cover what is needed. So there will be, this is going to be a painful process at this point.
A number of questions. Ms. Michaels covered some of my concerns on Access Initiative, but ballpark, if other programs do not come along that might fill the gap, what would we be looking at as the amount of money necessary when the Access Initiative ends?
The amount of money necessary to sustain it at the current level? We're not going to do that. We
All
don't
right.
have enough money to do
Okay,
that.
at less than the current level.
But-
Give us a number that we can have in our heads, because right now, I'm hearing a
One-
lot of
1.2
different
million.
programs. What?
1.2 million. 750,000 for PLL, and then that additional money would be available. About another 500, but be about 1.3 million. That's what we currently use now. We would just have to figure out how to redirect it and reprogram it.
Okay. Just for clarity, if anybody happens to be watching this meeting, when you talked about the court diversion, you're referring to the program that is overseen by the Regional Planning Commission, and the focus is on juveniles. Is that accurate?
Sort of. They are a provider. They are a service provider. We fund them.
Okay, all right. And the program that you described at the hospital, it's at Presence, if I'm remembering correctly, that focuses on adults, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just so.
And that assessment center that they're doing, that RPC is going to be doing, is for juveniles, so.
Right,
Right.
I just want the public to have that clear. a couple of macro comments, not just to your budget, but to all that we get, and this might be some guidance from Ms. Busey. When I'm looking at the amount of money spent on salaries, it would be very nice to have in parentheses what this is covering in the way of people, because I looked at some of those numbers across the board, and it's quite an amazing amount of money, and we're not having that given to us. The other is, instead of us sitting here and adding up what we think is overhead based on the abbreviations that are in the budget, it would be nice to have a summary of what is the percentage of the money that goes to overhead.
8.2%.
Well, this is an overall comment,
Okay.
but thank you very much for yours. I appreciate that.
Are there any other questions at this time for Mr. Tracy? All right, thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right, we'll move on to the Children's Advocacy Center, please. All right, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Adelaide Amy, and not only the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center, but I'm the brand-new executive director. So I hope you'll all have patience with me through this. This is my first time through the process. I just have a few comments, basically going through making the new budget. Pretty much, it looks as though our revenue will be flat, so I just changed it from 12-month to 13-month. And you'll remember that we are totally grant-funded. We don't get, I'm not sure what the term is, but the Champaign County tax money. And it looks as though our expenses will be just around the same, too. So that basically same thing went from 12 months to 13 months. One thing that has happened since I prepared this is you may have heard that we were notified we would be the recipient of some of the U of I Penn State settlement money. At this point, I still have no details about the parameters, so we could not, my board hasn't even made any decisions yet. So we couldn't add it in here. We're gonna, once things become clear, we're gonna have to do a budget amendment. Is that what it's called, or something?
We will update this budget document
Update.
if that information is available by the time the board adopts the budget. So we will report to the board when and if we have that information, how it impacts this budget.
Great, thank you. So that's pretty much what I have to say, and I welcome questions.
The amount of money on the settlement was somewhere around 42 or 44,000. Do you know?
From the U of I?
From the U of I.
44,586.
44, okay. And you know when you expect that to, the check? Is it a check in the mail? Or is
No, it's in our account, actually.
It's where-
It
it's in your
should have
hands?
gone in last Friday.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so it's waiting, but we still don't have the parameters for that. So there's still a lot of planning to do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Any questions, Chris?
For Deb, how is that accounted for? Is that would that be a budget amendment in this year's budget, in the 13 budget?
That's why we're waiting to determine if it's, the revenue is only receipted and the board does not plan to spend any of that in this year's budget, you would probably not see a budget amendment. But you would see it show up in any future budget reports as revenue. Because we don't really have to ask you to increase revenue. We have to ask you to increase
Okay.
expenditure.
So then it'd be carried over into the.
And so then it would, and that expense then would be added to the 2014 budget. Once we know how much expenditure would be 2013, 2014, and I'm not sure, you haven't received the entire amount yet, right? Wasn't it a portion
It
of
was,
it?
no, the whole
Was-
thing.
The whole thing, okay.
Yep.
So,
if they-
yeah, we
so if they
need that
commit them-
information.
If they're gonna spend the money next year, then we would expect to see their budget be in deficit for next year by that amount, right?
Yeah, but their
Essentially
fund
coming
balance
out
at the
the
end
fund
of
balance
13 is
will
going
go
to
up, right,
significantly
right.
increase so
Okay.
that it balances.
Mr. James?
I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not, but the last gentleman, Mr. Williams, did he retire or go on to greener pastures?
He went on, he's still working for Champaign County in court services. I believe that's what, court services and probation in the courthouse. And he loves his job, and everyone was sad to see him go, but I think it was a great move for him. He was in this position for 12 years and left a phenomenal program.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Let's go to F, Animal Control Fund.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Jost, for those who don't remember me from last year, and I'm the director of the Animal Control Department. I wish I had some really great groundbreaking news for animal control, but it's exactly the same as last year for the most part. Not much has changed for my upcoming fiscal year from last year's fiscal year. We will see an increase in revenue from the registration of dogs and cats, because we had, on January 1st of 2014, we'll have a $3 increase on altered pets, rabies registration, and a $2 increase for unaltered pets registrations, and that equaled a $5 increase over a 2-year period. So we had changed the ordinance in 2011 to start to generate a little bit more revenue through registrations. So I anticipate a little bit more revenue coming in from the registration of animals. We register about anywhere from 11,000 to 12,000 dogs a year and about 5,000 cats. So it won't be a huge amount, but it will help offset a little bit of the increase in costs. This is the second year we've divided the animal administrative part of it from the animal control services and the animal impound services. And that's really, I was really nervous about that, but it's working out really well, because we can now really see what the true cost of each individual part of animal control is, and we can start charging the villages and cities accordingly to what it actually costs to provide those services. We renewed the contract with the City of Champaign for animal control services, and in 2014, we'll be renewing the impound agreement for the City of Champaign and the City of Urbana. And we may look at changing those impound agreements for the villages as well. But that's the only kind of major change for animal control services. The animal impound services is pretty much the same as it is every year. We did see a decrease in animals by about 100 animals, or 100 dogs and 100 cats for 2012 from 2011. So I think our spaying and neutering aggressive spaying and neutering program is working, and we're seeing a decrease in the animals that are actually coming into the facility.
That's what I was hoping for, that conclusion.
Yeah.
That the education is starting to take hold. It's been years and years and years of education and informing the public about spay and neutering, and I think it's starting to take hold now, and I congratulate you on that.
I think it is too. I really hope that it's making a huge difference.
I think it is.
But there aren't any really major changes for the impound budget as well. There's a little bit of an increase in the professional services line. We pay the veterinarians to issue the tags for us, and we pay them 50 cents per tag that they issue. And I'm seeing an increase in the number of tags that the vets are issuing, so I had to kind of increase that line to accommodate that. And, the only other kind of increase would be in the gasoline department. So, it's hard to predict how the gasoline prices will be, but that's a major thing that affects my budget each year. Does anyone have any specific questions, or?
The one other thing that I wanted to point out as well, I've always been opposed to euthanization of animals, and I want to congratulate you. I'm noticing from 2008, 2009, 2010, and now 2012, a significant drop-off in having to euthanize animals coming in, and I want to congratulate you on that. If the education of the spay and neutering and people understanding that, the cats running wild and having litters 10 and 12, we used to have that as a major problem, trying to even fill up the Humane Society. Where are we going to put all these cats and dogs? And this is an excellent report, and I want to thank you for that. Ms. Schwartz?
It might just be a typo, but my question is on all the other budgets except for the impound services, you seem to have done a 13 months, but the impound services on page 65 has the same for 2014 and 2013, so I'm wondering if it's just a typo. Or maybe not, I don't know. 65. The revenue total. Everything else seemed to have been adjusted for the 13 months, and so I'm guessing it's a typo, but I don't know.
We all have to look at that. The fiscal year
Yeah.
13 projected and 14 revenues are identical. That could be a problem, and it could be a problem in the program that picked that up. Yeah, no, that's probably.
Okay. Mr. Hartke?
Yeah, I want to ditto Mr. Kurtz on the euthanasia numbers coming down. Thank you. I had a question more in your general report here.
If I could point out one thing,
Yeah.
Ms. Jost provided her annual report with the budget, but she's actually going to present it at the Justice meeting in September. So we probably don't want to get into a lot of details about that because you're going to have a separate presentation
Okay.
on that report.
I'm
Thanks.
absolutely fine with waiting for that at the proper time. I just saw it in here and had some questions about it, but I'm cool.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Have a great night.
your time. You too. I see a gentleman in an orange shirt getting ready for the weekend. Come on up, Jeff. I have highway funds now.
If I could, there are 2 replacement pages at your desks when you got here this evening. Those are both for highway. If you just remove the page that was in there and put the new page in, the numbers on them.
Good evening. My budget is, got a lot of pages to it, a lot of information. Some of it is there for your enjoyment, for reading. I'll try to at least get through what I feel are the highlights of the budgets, and then, of course, answer any questions that you have at any time. If you want to ask questions about a specific budget, or wait till the end after we've gone through all the different budgets. Because we do have, we basically have 4 budgets that run through the Highway Department. We have the County Highway Fund, the County Bridge Fund, the Motor Fuel Tax Fund, and the Federal Aid Matching Tax Fund. Currently have 9 maintenance men at the Highway Department, down from 11 a few years ago, so we've reduced the staff there. But our other staff, including our engineering, clerical, and administrative staff is the same as it has been for quite some time. You can see the rates there on page 87 for the different funds. We're nowhere near the maximum rate of assessed valuation on any of those funds. but you can see those there, .061 for highway, .0307 for county bridge fund, and then the federal aid matching tax, there's a memo at the end that we can talk about at the end about hopefully getting some additional funds in that fund. Page 89 just talks about the township road districts. As you may or may not know, all of their money for their township bridge program, as well as their motor fuel tax fund, is filtered through the highway department. They set up their programs through us. We administer them on their behalf. We do a lot of designs for them and a lot of estimates and that kind of thing for the township highway commissioners. Although their MFT funds are inadequate, just like they are for the counties and the municipalities in the state, the townships seem to be keeping pretty good pace with their bridges. As of right now on the county and the township system, we do not have any posted structures on any of those systems that I'm aware of. So that's a pretty big deal when you go around looking at other counties south of the collar counties in Chicago. You see a lot of posted structures, whether they be 10-ton or 20-ton, where they're limiting the amount of weights on those bridges. And you can see there on page 90 the township valuations and the road district miles. We do have over 1,500 miles of township roads in Champaign County, one of the biggest township road district mileages in the state of Illinois. So going into the county highway fund on page 91.
Jeff?
Yes.
Ms. Bergson, please, ask a question.
Yes.
Microphone, please, Astrid.
You have that Champaign and Urbana Township have gone down in value for 4 years in a row. Why?
These, Chris?
Oh,
I could answer that. It's because more of them keep getting annexed into the city.
I see, okay.
Yeah. That's just a document that we receive, I believe, from the clerk's office. So it's just a document that we use because when the township asks us for help on their bridge projects, we have to actually take their valuation and make sure that they're taxing at the right rate and that their valuation is low enough so that we can actually help them on their projects. They have to be 0.02% of their valuation. The project has to be larger than that, or the county cannot kick in on their bridge fund projects.
Chris?
I'm sorry, Astrid, I guess I should extend on that. I mean, I've said that quite as clearly. Champaign and Urbana, although they're cities, have townships that are essentially coterminous. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Yeah, so Urbana loses ground to Cunningham Township, and Champaign Township loses ground to Champaign City Township.
Right. And I don't believe either one of those townships have any roads, so we don't deal with the two urban townships. Only the 28 rural township have road districts. So the county highway fund is basically our operational fund. It pays for everything from personnel to turn the lights on to, our capital equipment needs. We do show a slight increase in the proposed taxes, $2.142 million in 2014. And you'll see there some other miscellaneous revenues that we have, including one of the largest ones is line 34371, material and equipment used from county MFT. That's money that we actually transfer from the motor fuel tax fund by renting our equipment that the county highway department has basically to the motor fuel tax fund in order to do projects and maintenance on our roadways. And we've been doing that for, about 4 years now to a great extent to kind of bolster our county highway fund. So you see our fees and fines total about $440,000. We do have some monies that come in from General Corp, and that's to pay the salary and benefits for one of our mechanics who is basically assigned to take care of all of the General Corp vehicles on behalf of the county at our highway department.
Chris?
Sorry, Jeff,
Yes.
sort of a little bit behind. You said you have 19 authorized maintenance worker positions, but only 9 are currently filled. Did I hear you right?
I said 9 are currently filled. Authorized, I don't believe we have 19. We have 11 authorized.
So 9 out of the 11
That's correct.
are filled?
Yes.
Or sorry, 9 out of the 11 are filled. What does the budget assume with regard to that? That they'll stay empty or that they'll be filled?
That they'll stay
Assumes
empty.
they'll stay empty. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. We have 9 snowplow routes. Thus, that's kind of the lowest number we can go to unless we're going to start hiring part-timers on both, sides of our 12-hour shifts. So we have dropped down to 9. I feel like that's an appropriate number for us. I don't feel we can go any lower, but I don't anticipate going up any more unless something weird happens and we get more roads from the state or something of that nature, which I'm not looking forward to if we do. Let's hope we don't. So regular full-time employees, Deb's increased that number to a 13-month budget. As you'll see, our personnel is basically 60% of our entire budget, almost 2/3 of our entire budget at $1.7 million. We do see a large increase in our commodities for gasoline and oil. And what we've been doing a lot more lately is doing a lot of seal coats and maintenance on our roadways, which puts our trucks on the road quite a bit more, hauling the materials for the seal coats, as well as, during the wintertime when we're doing, when we don't have other things for them to do when it's not snowing. So we're hauling that material in the winter, and then obviously we're hauling it from the stockpile in the summer to the seal coating operations. So the majority of that fuel increase, it's also obviously due to 13 months, but the majority of that fuel increase you see a large increase from 2012 to 2014 is simply because we're driving the trucks more. Fuel's probably a similar price as it was a couple of years ago, but we got the trucks on the road more, trying to do more with them. And if you drive around and see some of the roads we've seal coated this year, I think they look pretty good. If you see the roads that are very, very black on top and the stripes really pop out, that's our seal coating operation that's doing that work. Services, we got everything from computers and gas and electric and water. Our biggest one, obviously, there is our heavy equipment maintenance. That includes all of our trucks and all of our, backhoes and inloaders and everything that we have. Even though we do all that in-house, it does cost a lot of money to maintain that heavy equipment on a year-to-year basis. Just to buy the parts, there's obviously no personnel costs in that unless we have to actually send the equipment somewhere because we just don't have the ability or the knowledge to do the work. So it does take a big chunk out of our budget every year, that heavy equipment maintenance, as well as just maintaining the regular vehicles, the equipment maintenance on the smaller vehicles we have. So our services, you can see there total up to about $440,000. One glaring note that always bothers me when I put this budget together is road improvements. We always seemingly have a zero there because there is no money in the highway fund to do roads, which you think the highway fund would do roads, but it just does other stuff that keep us going so that we can do roads with other money. In our capital equipment, there is a list behind your highway fund budget that shows all of our equipment and our vehicles, the age, and what kind of equipment there is. We've had a pretty bad year as far as equipment goes this year. We've had 3 of our dump trucks go down on us. One of them blew up an engine, and 2 of them were rusted so badly that the frame underneath them cracked. So those 3 trucks have actually been taken out of service. We have a new one coming, and we're looking at actually, for the first time ever, of possibly purchasing a used truck from another county that has low mileage, just simply because we don't have the money in the budget to replace all 3 of those pieces of equipment. But you'll see, one of them was a 1997. You start driving a vehicle for 16 years and putting salt through it, eventually bad things are going to happen due to corrosion. So we're planning on purchasing another truck next year is in the budget and try to get us back up to the same level of service that we have and the same amount of trucks. But, if we have 11 trucks, we go on 10 or 11-year rotation on those trucks. We need to buy one every year, basically, and those trucks are running us about $150,000 a piece, all equipped with a stainless steel bed and with the plow equipment that we need to replace when we do those types of trucks. And then we have some other miscellaneous equipment that is going to be coming up for need too. We've got a backhoe. Our end loader is having some issues because that's what we scoop all the salt into the trucks with. So we're doing a better job because we do have the facility, we do have the wash bay, we do have the underwash, but, it's just difficult to keep up with the amount of corrosion that happens underneath those vehicles when they go out to plow snow during the winter. When they bring them in, though, I guarantee you, before that thing is parked for the night, it's been washed, the undercarriage has been flushed, and, but still, you can't find it all in there, and it still does some corrosion underneath those trucks. So that's the majority of our capital fund, obviously, is purchasing of equipment that we need. And then we've got a facility bond payment to pay for the facility that we're in. So our expenditure totals are higher than our revenue totals, not quite by the 8% that you would expect to see since it's a 13-month budget, but there are some things that, you don't have to do every month, like buy trucks and so forth. So you can see our per capita is relatively flat on the new sheet that Deb gave you since 2010, and our full-time equivalency for employees has gone down from 22 to 20. I think we're doing real well on our performance indicators. Our cost of our projects based on the design has been in pretty good shape. We do a good job of estimating and making sure we have enough money. We did have the project this year. You'll see that indicator number 4 on page 96. Our big roadway project this year was something a little bit unique that I don't think anybody in the state had actually done, where we did a cold-in-place recycling and put a very thin asphalt layer over the top of it. And when you start putting thin amounts of asphalt over recycled bases, sometimes you're going to run over a little bit on the asphalt, and that's why you'll see that number in 2013 projected at 105%, because that particular contract, we had some difficulties controlling the asphalt and the cost on that. See, we're doing a number of sign replacements on page 97. We are in the middle of a new sign management program, where we're actually going to have a picture and a database of every single road sign on the county highway system in Champaign County with a GPS coordinate, with an age, with a reflectivity number, so that we know when we need to replace signs, when we replace them, they're actually put back into the database, and we know that, unless the sign gets vandalized or something unique happens to it, those signs are generally good for about 10 years out there. So that's why you're seeing those traffic signs repaired and replaced going up. We are expending a lot of money on surface maintenance, crack sealing, as well as seal coating. That the 14 budget is not quite as high as the 2013 projected budget, but there was a couple years in 2012 and 2011 where we actually couldn't get the materials we were using to do the seal coats because we were getting them from Christensen County over in Taylorville, and their source dried up and we had to find another source, and now we have another one over in Pekin. So we're starting to pick back up on those seal coats and try to make up for lost time on that. But our PCI is hanging in there. We want to see that pavement condition index of the roads at least at 70. So we're trying to stay there. You'll see when we get to the motor fuel tax fund that there are some other indicators that maybe aren't looking so well as far as how our roads are doing as compared to the past. So is there any questions particular to the highway fund before I move to the bridge fund?
Mr. Kibler first, then Mr. Schroeder.
You said my 3 favorite letters, KPI. With respect to indicators on long-term success of the highway department, most of what we have here are more what's going to happen this year as opposed to how we've performed and how well our highways have been maintained year over year. You have done a good job at an initial stab as compared to most that we've seen today. Could there be additional, how difficult would it be? I'll just throw it out there. To measure how long, such as something is resurfacing, how long should resurfacing take? And
Right.
after, how long should it last, I should say?
14 years.
14 years. So are there measures to determine, okay, we resurfaced in 1997, did we have to resurface again in 2005 or 2015? Do we measure those?
We do. We started measuring those about 5 years ago with our pavement management system. So we have 5 years of historical data going into the future. Yeah, we're measuring the actual condition of the roadway every single year through the history, from 5 years ago until, we don't do that anymore. So we don't have a real good handle on that from 2000 or 2005, but from 2008 going forward, we have a very good handle on how long things are going to last, what the time value of money is for doing a seal coat versus an overlay versus a cold in place recycling. So yeah, we do have a very good methodology to deal with that, and that's in that pavement management system. That's in the back in the motor fuel tax, because when you talk about highway fund and motor fuel tax fund, you're really paying for the same things. You're paying for roads. So all those, all those things kind of get put into the highway fund as performance indicators, but we use the motor fuel tax fund to pay for the pavement management system. So I kind of put that information back by the motor fuel tax fund.
Well, I just want to give credit where credit is due. So if you can throw them in, well, if they're back here, then great. But I was just curious if that's possible to manage, because I would
Yes.
love to see that over time.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I'm going to back up here through your presentation and go to page 134 and 135. And the MFT fund in 2009, and discuss that $9 million balance we had. Wasn't that, some of that money, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't some of that money from the feds when they gave up the Philo to Toronto slab and the Philo to Sydney slabs for upkeep and maintenance?
Let me look at that. In 2000, we really received that money in 2003 and spent it. Because that was a project that happened right before I got here. And they gave up all the way from 45 all the way over to the Vermilion County line, and the county took it over. They gave us, I don't remember the number because I wasn't here, but they spent almost 80% of that when they rebuilt the roadway, and that money would have been out of the fund by the time that 2005 budget number that I'm showing on there. Now, obviously, we built the county highway department, and there's some monies that we use from motor fuel tax funds to build our building.
I was trying to remember how much, was that 3 or 4 million out of there?
Deb, do you recall how that shook out? I can't recall off the top of my head. It's probably 2 or 3 million. Yeah, it wasn't 5, but yeah, because we use motor fuel tax fund, use general court money. We bonded. So yeah.
For the remainder of that. if I
We
remember.
bonded 1.7, which was the highway share and the general corp share.
Okay, great. On fringe road agreements, and maybe I misplaced this. I don't think it's in your information, or maybe it isn't. How many more years are we paying for Curtis Road?
We have one more payment.
Okay.
About $650,000, but that road hasn't been finalized out through the state process yet. So the city of Champaign's holding on to that bill until they get final word from IDOT that project is totally complete and off the books. But it looks to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $650,000.
Okay.
We're left to pay on Curtis Road.
Do we have any more out there that we're paying on, any more fringe roads?
We'll have the Lincoln Avenue project coming up in the future, which we have a $1.1 million resolution on. Other than that, Olympian Drive is a no-cost roadway for the county.
Yeah, and I understand we've been a little delayed on Olympia Road. That's a different subject. One more thing. I noticed on the 3-year budget for bridge and culverts, you've got what I consider three pretty big projects there.
Yes.
On County Highway 1, north and south.
Yep.
And County Highway 22. Are those are all bridges, aren't they?
They are.
Okay. Where's County Highway 1 again?
Dewey Fisher Road.
All right.
There's two bridges up on the north end, kind of up by 136. They only separate each other by probably less than a mile. That's why we called them north and south, but they're both on the north end of the project.
And
Very large
And
bridges.
22?
County Road 22 is the road north of Penfield up through the Forest Preserve that we just redid this year.
That's right.
There's an old concrete structure there with concrete side rails that if you look underneath it, you probably don't want to stand there very long. You want to get out.
I've got a couple concerns on County Highway, and I can't remember which one is. I see the sign every day. North of Sador's.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple north of the Kaskaskia Bridge that are, according to one of the neighbors that lives down there, really bad shape. And if you drive on the southbound side of it, seems like every day.
There's a little dip there. I know which one you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I know. It's not the bridge. It's some kind of fill issue that we're trying to deal with, but the bridge isn't going to go down. It's just there's some fill behind it
That's more of a culvert, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call them all bridges because
Oh.
they cost so much money, they
Yeah.
might as well be.
It costs like a bridge. All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Patsy, you had your hand up, didn't you?
I do. A couple of questions. With your payment condition index of roads, do you have statistics on how well the striping stays and when you have to go back and restripe?
We're not monitoring that at this point on our PCI or through our pavement management system. I mean, we could look at, because they take film every other year, so we could look at the striping through their film. What we actually do is, it kind of depends on when we stripe, how much snow we get, how much salt and sand we throw out, and how much we got to scrape.
Yeah.
That determines the length, the longevity of the paint on the roadway. So literally every spring, we go out and do a survey of the roadways, windshield survey. I send somebody out to survey the roads to see which ones need to be striped. Typically, about every other year. We used to stripe every year. On an ongoing basis, when I came here, we just went out and striped every road every year just because they were there. And I thought that was a pretty large sum of money that was going out the window, so we actually have been doing a condition of the roadways, and we put a map together when we bid our striping bid.
Okay. My second question is the traffic signs that you've replaced. We are an aging demographic population. Are those letters larger now?
No, the letters aren't larger, but I can guarantee you the signs are a lot brighter than they used to be, so they ought to fill up your eyes better. But I totally agree. The only thing that the feds have done as far as enlargement of the signs is actually like the wayfinding signs or the signs that you see on a street name. Those letters do actually have to be bigger than they used to be, but a 36 or a 48-inch stop sign hasn't changed. It's still,
It hasn't changed.
no. The letter
There's
sizes have
There's a
not
great
changed.
study in Canada showing how important it is, and if we started changing our signs the moment that study came out, it would take us almost 2 decades to do all the signs. The reason for my question. Okay. My
Okay.
last question is, does the county contractor have bulk rates for buying gasoline? This applies to all the cars that the county uses, or do you pay the same rate I pay at the gas station?
Pay the same rate you pay at the gas station.
So.
We do not have a bulk fuel tank anymore.
Oh, we don't. Oh, because the reason I'm asking is I heard somebody talking about Champaign and that they have a lower gas per gallon cost because they're buying from the city. So that's what prompted my question. So why don't we have a bulk tank anymore?
Because we found that no matter how much fuel you bought anymore in this economic age, you weren't saving money by buying 10,000 gallons versus going and filling up your tank for 20 gallons. And It is a environmental, as you know, to keep a tank in the ground. Once it starts leaking, bad things happen. That can really run into a huge sum of money. So we took them out. And we just buy, we have Casey's cards, we have a fleet card, we have a number of different cards that we use depending on where we're at in the county and where we need fuel.
So there's no way of having a memorandum of understanding with, say, Champaign or Urbana, who are doing this, for the county to take advantage of that?
What are they doing? I'm confused on what you're telling me that they're doing.
I was told that they have bulk rate for their gasoline.
Do they have a tank in the ground?
I don't have the
I don't
answer to
know
that.
either. I can find out.
Okay,
I can
great.
talk to the city.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Astrid? Microphone, please.
Those little reflectors that they put in the stripes?
Yeah.
Someplace, how cost-effective and safety-effective are they, and do they last?
You know, I'm trying to figure that out right now, to be very honest with you, because we put them down on Monticello Road, and we're looking at putting them up on the Dewey Fisher Road when we do that project. You know, the safety people will tell you it's a great deal. I honestly think after a few years, they're worn out to the point where, you know, there's not a lot of effect anymore. You see them driving down the road during the day, and you're like, I should look at those at night. And then you're driving down the road at night, and they must not jump out at me, because then I don't remember that there's even reflectors there. You know, we put them on the Monticello Road because we got a grant to do it. And
They're nice in the rain.
yeah, they are nice in the rain. And, you know, actually the striping and the beads that they put in the striping are becoming a lot better than they used to be as well. But I can't answer your question, to be honest with you, about how long they last or how effective they are. I know that the safety people love them. And we'll put them in if somebody helps us out, but I'm not sure that they're cost effective when we're talking about using local dollars.
Aaron?
Yeah, Jeff, before we got away from you, I just wanted to say, in my job, I travel a lot of the two-lane roads, both state and county, and between the two of them, the county roads are by far the better roads. So I just wanted to get that out there to you and your department. Kudos for that. And just a little bit to Patsy, of course, the main highway roads signs, you're supposed to know a lot of those by shape and color. So other than the directions and such, the main ones that are supposed to warn you of stuff, you're supposed to know.
Well, let me continue here. Through the county bridge fund, property tax is up a little bit based on Deb's PTEL formula. You know, I said when I made comment to Mr. Schrader about the bridges, I mean, literally, a township bridge now is about a $250,000 deal for us. Our county bridges, you know, I think the cheapest one we're going to find anymore is maybe $600,000 or $700,000 to replace. So they are very, very expensive. And when you see, you know, our property tax at about 1.074 and total revenues at 1.085, and you start thinking about those numbers in your head about how many you can replace with that amount of money, it really doesn't get you very far, depending on the size of the bridges. Now, we do have the Township Bridge Program for the townships, and we match that money with our county bridge funds.
Chris, go ahead. Chris has a question.
Yeah, Jeff, what's the reason for that, the big increase in construction costs? Is it work comp, is it materials, is it labor, is it, we're just getting gouged? What, any ideas?
We're not getting gouged. I mean, if we're getting gouged, everybody in the country is getting gouged, because we actually have pretty good bridge costs in Champaign County, and we generally get 4 or 5 bidders on a small bridge, which is really good. But, you know, just a few years back, all the materials just went through the roof, and I don't know if it's competition based for getting the materials. Obviously, labor is expensive. Fuel, when it went up, everything went up. You know, but honestly, on the county system, we're building a lot better bridge than we used to build. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, and even it probably as distant as 10 years ago, we were still putting in those precast, pre-stressed deck beam bridges, which they look great when you put them in, and they're cheap, and it's like putting together a bridge with Tinker Toys, and you're done. But once you start putting salt on them, they just explode.
So is
and
that
they come apart.
50%, is that 50% for the same bridge 5 years ago versus now, or is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I understand we're building them better, but we're still paying 50%. If we built the same bridge 5 years ago, we would have paid
Yes.
Half the price.
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry, 50%.
Right,
Price.
but a township bridge, let's say a $250,000 township bridge, one of similar length, size on the county system, we're probably gonna pay another 30, 40, 50% because of the quality of the bridge that we're putting in. They don't salt their roads, they don't have as many heavy load impacts on top of them, so they kind of choose the lesser cost, cheaper model. We're going with the best bridge we can put out there, because every time we gotta take a bridge out, we're gonna disrupt traffic for 6 months, and it's a big pain for
Yeah,
everybody.
I understand I understand the build it right the first time argument. I was just curious about
Yeah.
Since you called out specifically the sort of dramatic increase in cost, I was just curious where that came from. And it sounds like it's primarily materials and fuel.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So you can see our, on page 104, our bridge and culvert projects in 2012, 2013, and projected going forward, and made mention of those before, and the large costs of those projects, and talked a little bit about how I think the townships are doing a pretty good job of maintaining their bridges, although maybe they're just not calling me asking for them because they don't have the money. I don't know. No, they aren't. They do a very good job. We have to inspect every single bridge in the county either on a 2-year or a 4-year rotation. So we actually have bridge inspection reports in our office and pictures of every single bridge in Champaign County that my staff goes out and does the investigations and the bridge inspections. So we keep a really good tab, and the state makes sure we keep a really good tab, and the feds make sure that the state keeps us a really good tab on all the bridges. Ever since the Minneapolis bridge collapse, that's been a big point of emphasis across the country, as you know. So that's the county bridge fund. County motor fuel tax fund, we do get that on a monthly basis. So we do show a 13-month motor fuel tax receipt of $2,950,000. It would have been basically flat going into 2014, but we added that 13th month. There is a miscellaneous revenue that Deb and I talked about. There's some money left in the building fund for our highway department that we believe we've paid everybody and gotten through everything. So that money will be transferred back to the motor fuel tax fund in 2014 budget process. You'll see the engineering services are quite large on 533.4. We're anticipating some engineering services for Lincoln Avenue in 2014, and that's part of the $1.1 million that we had a resolution for, is paying some of the engineering services to do that project, as well as obviously there's some engineering services in there for our projects as well. Pretty large number there for road and bridge maintenance, like we talked about, doing a lot of seal coats and a lot of crack sealing to try to keep ahead of the curve so that the roads don't deteriorate and we have to spend more on the backside. Our equipment rental, $533.51. That's the money that goes back into the highway fund to help keep that fund above water. And then we've got right-of-way is a huge number in there in 2014. That's the anticipated right-of-way purchases on the Dewey Fisher Road. And we basically need right-of-way all the way from St. Thomas More up to 136. Estimating at this point about 10 feet on each side of the roadway. So you can calculate that out and think about how many acres we may need to purchase going up there. That's why that number in right-of-way is so large. And honestly, that's why that project is most likely getting pushed from 2014 to 2015. When we found out that we needed that many, there's 116 pieces of land, different owners between here and there. 88 of them, I believe, we need right-of-way on. So I'm going to get to personally talk with 88 different people and try to get right-of-way. And you can't do that in a short time frame. Yeah, and it'll be enjoyable. I actually do enjoy meeting all those people if they're nice, but I'm sure some of them won't be. So we have $1.5 million in road improvements, and what we're looking at doing in 2014 is the road that goes from Thomasboro over to the Dewey Fisher Road, which is in poor condition, and ties in there at the curves on County Road 1 or the Dewey Fisher Road, and then Hensley Road, which comes over from basically I-57 and Market Street area over to the Dewey Fisher Road. So once we get in and do County Road 1, we'll have the roads that link into it in good shape as well. So we'll have that whole corridor kind of ready. Now, what we do Dewey Fisher Road, we do Thomasboro Road, and we do the Hensley Road. Total price tag for that's going to be about $9 million to do all that stuff. We're getting a lot of money from other places, but that's why I'm saying the motor fuel tax is going to be down to about $2 million after we get done with that project. Just because we're going to be tapping into some of that fund balance to make that project happen. But we got highway safety improvement dollars, we're getting TARP money, we're getting federal dollars on that project. So we definitely want to make sure we use all those resources, can tap into them, but that project is going to be a heck of a project going forward.
Patsy?
So.
You have a big chunk of money here on engineering services, and then on the preceding budget, there was not as large an amount, but it's recognizable. Is this to a point that instead of paying out to engineering services, we should be expanding the engineering services within your domain?
We do all of our quote-unquote relatively straightforward engineering projects in-house, which are basically our overlay projects, our cold-in-place recycling, where we're not going out, we're not buying right-of-way, we're not widening the roadway. We do all of that type of work in-house. When you do a project that's going to be about $9 million, there's no way we can staff up to do that. And what I don't want to do, I don't want to be like these contractors talk about, you get this great big amount of money in one year and you staff up and they gear up and they hire all this labor and buy all this equipment. And then next year there's nothing for them to do and then they're laying everybody off. So I would rather hit the peaks with using outside resources than to try to find something for somebody to do if I hired a couple more engineers. And then, after the Dewey Fisher Road project, and we're basically back to our regular type of motor fuel tax projects where we maybe can spend $1 million to $1.5 million a year, we can do all that work in-house. So the majority of that money is going not only to Lincoln Avenue to pay for the consultants for that project, the Urbana project, but to pay for the Dewey Fisher Road engineering services. Think about even just the Dewey Fisher Road without the links coming in is about $7 million. Typically engineering services, 10 to 15%. Yeah, that's a lot of money going out the door. There's no doubt about it. But to have all the surveying equipment and to have all the computerized stuff that we need to have and to have the people that are knowledgeable to do that and to keep them busy on a year-by-year basis would be very difficult for us to do.
Thank you.
Okay?
Jeff, is the downgrade with the motor fuel tax, is that why on your road and bridge maintenance, it's dropped to 170,000?
No, it's just, this was the first year that we had access to the materials we were using for the seal coats. So we really went hog wild this year and did a whole bunch, trying to get caught up. Next year is going to feel more like a regular maintenance year to us, and we'll do seal coats, but we're not going to do as many as we did this year, basically.
Okay.
Is why that's kind of dropping.
Okay. Jeff, anything else?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
You
The back.
obviously
You want the
can
source distribution? Yeah.
look at the pavement management study. You can see there is a lot of stuff in there. Mr. Kibler, there's a lot of different types of rankings and different kinds of criteria there. You can see our PCI ratings on all of our different roadways. Specifically, I'd just like to look at page 123 in that pavement management study. It didn't come out as well probably in the copy as it did coming off of my computer with the color coordination, but we're doing a decent job of getting back and taking care of the roadways that are, you know, the reds and the oranges and the yellows. The red road up in the top right-hand corner, that's County Road 22, which we took care of this year. The other red road, County Road 23, which is in the top left-hand corner, we're projected to do something with that in the next couple years after the Dewey Fisher Road is complete. And then most of the orange routes, which don't show up real orange, they kind of show up as a dark yellow in your copy, like the Dewey Fisher Road and the Hensley Road and the road coming out of Thomasboro, are all kind of on our radar screen right now. And then once we get those projects done, I think we're doing a better job of maintaining them going forward, you know. Maintenance at Champaign County, as I've told you in the past, used to be, you know, 10 years overlay, 10 years overlay, 10 years overlay. And that's not our scheme anymore. We're trying to get out there and do the crack sealing and do the chip sealing and do the preventive maintenance, you know, put the shingles back on the roof without having to replace the roof. But you will see on page 130 something that kind of bothered me that came out of that pavement management system. It shows that 75.6% of our roads deteriorated, only 2.5% had no change, and only about 22% improved. Now, if you drill deeper into those numbers, a deteriorated road means it moved 1 point on the PCI out of 100. You know, so we think we're doing a good job of maintaining, but this graph bothered me coming out of the pavement management system, is that our roads have deteriorated. And it's basically, you build a new road and it starts deteriorating immediately. Even if you put a seal coat on it, it really doesn't increase. It just kind of holds the line, and then the next year it deteriorates. So, and it's not as telling as you might think, but that graph is a little bit bothersome to me. Yeah, this is the first year they gave me this one, and it kind of freaked me out, so I'm gonna have to work on that. Yeah. And then in the federal aid matching fund, there's a memo in the back of my budget report that talks about the federal aid matching fund, which is basically the monies that we use to match federal aid projects on the county highway system. And we talked about the motor fuel tax money and you know, how it's declining, and we're having a tough time building roadways with that, and we have no money in the highway fund. And you can see here on page 133 that back, you know, in the heyday of the federal aid matching tax, you know, there was anywhere from $465,000 to $250,000 levied for that particular fund in any given year. And then, you know, it was cut in half in 1999, and then apparently in 2002, a couple years before I came, you'll see there the balance of the levy was appropriated by the county board to the public health initiatives. And since then, it's just been, you know, a 0.0002% type of levy. And I'd like to get something back into that fund to start building it back up. What worries me is there are quite a few federal dollars out there, even though every level of government, hopefully except for Champaign County, is broke. You know, there are still federal programs out there, and I don't want to lose my ability to try to get those federal dollars because I don't have any money to match those federal dollars. We've done a pretty good job in getting highway safety improvement money. We did a good job of getting ARRA money. We do a good job of getting our federal dollars, our high priority bridge dollars. You can see on page 134, we've received almost $14 million since 2007 just on the roadways, and that's just the federal dollars. You know, we have to match that with a minimum of 20% of local dollars in order to receive those dollars for those projects. So as the motor fuel tax revenues get tighter and tighter and prices continue to escalate, you know, we're going to have a really difficult time trying to match those federal dollars. So I'm asking that $75,000 be put back into, or a rate of 0.0022% be put into the 2014 budget, and that be allowed to grow with Deb's calculations in the PTEL formula, so that we going into the future, have some hope of having some money to match federal programs and keep our roadways in good shape in Champaign County. So I hope you consider
Chris?
that request. I know there's no extra money out there. I realize that. Somebody's got to pay Peter, rob Peter to pay Paul. That's your decision.
Chris?
And Jeff, if you can clarify, my understanding is that we can use money out of the motor fuel tax fund to match federal dollars.
That's correct.
But we can use money that's in the federal aid match fund only for matching federal dollars. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have 3 questions.
Sure.
One on this page 133. I realize you were not here when this decision was made, but can you give us some historic perspective as to why that decision was made?
Deb, do you have some perspective on that? She put that together, actually, just for your knowledge. I didn't put this together. Deb did that first sheet that shows the dollars.
Okay.
So she may.
I do not recall why the federal aid match levy was cut in half in 1999 when tax caps came into effect for the county, but I can tell you that is the year in which the county, it was probably reappropriated to another fund, and from that point forward, everything was capped. I can tell you that in 2002, the levy was cut to the bare minimum by the county board in November 2001 when they approved the 2002 budget. And that was a reaction of that was the first year the county board was controlled by the Democratic Party. In the prior year, in November of 2000, when the Republican Party was going out, one of the last actions that they took was to cap the levy, which was the last time they had a chance to increase the tax levy for county public health to 10 cents, which had been approved by the voters. They capped it at 3. And then it was forever capped after that. So that action was taken in November 2010, when the Republican board knew it was going out and the Democratic board was coming in. And the following November, the Democratic County Board took the money from the federal aid highway match levy and appropriated it for the use of public health.
Okay, thank you. Question 2, back to page 123. I'm curious, why Dewey Fisher Road percolated to the top of your to-do list when the other roads are in red?
It's based on safety. We have a number of accidents out on Dewey Fisher Road. It actually made what IDOT calls their 5% list, which means it was one of the top 5% most dangerous county routes. Champaign County has had an issue up on that roadway for a number of years. IDOT actually came and did a safety audit on that roadway. They took 2 days and had a team from the feds and some university types and IDOT and state police all do a safety assessment of that roadway, and they came up with some differing ideas on how we could increase the safety on that roadway, which led to some federal dollars on that roadway, as well as the traffic. That is the highest trafficked road we have in the county. So sometimes you got to measure, okay, the road's in bad shape, but there's 250 vehicles a day. We have another road that's not quite as bad, but people have actually died driving on the roadway from one reason or another, and there's 5,000 vehicles a day. So you kind of got to weigh it all. You can't just pick your red roads all the time. You kind of got a balancing act of, what your safety is, what the amount of traffic is out there, and what condition that roadway is in.
Yeah, it would be nice to have that kind of additional information on the map. Then I wouldn't have asked you the question, right?
Yeah, that'd be a pretty busy map, though.
I know it is. Okay, my last question is way back to the very beginning, where you talk about what the levy is at and where the levy could be. What steps need to be taken to move that levy up toward the maximum amount?
Sure, that's a PTEL deal, isn't it, Deb?
Okay, Ms. Busey, thank you very much.
the steps that need to be taken, and you will see the total of the county board's property tax levies. It'll be provided to you tomorrow night. The only way to do that is to take levy authority from another levy over which you have responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have, Jeff was next.
Jeff, just a quick question on this memo with respect to where you'd like to go. Since we have 365,000 in there now, what would you consider to be a good position to be at in order to attain the maximum dollar amount that we can? So 365,000 needs to go up to what in order for us to be in good competition for all possible monies?
On average, if you look at $14 million a year over 8 years from 2007 to 2015, that's almost a couple $1 million a year. We need $400,000 just to match that, right? 80-20. We're not going to get there. I don't see that happening. But what I'm trying to do is get it started in the right direction and get a levy amount in there so that we can start talking about it again, because it's just been a revenue-only thing. That fund balance that you see on there will most likely be gone once we do the Dewey Fisher Road, because I'm going to need it to match that project.
That was my next question is, we haven't really done much with it in the past couple of years.
That's
Just
right.
kind of curious if it's just there to say, yeah, we have this money, but, okay. We are actually using it. Thank you.
Gary?
Thank you. I wanted to give Patsy a little anecdotal report on the Dewey Fisher Road, and it's also where I learned a little bit about physics and the differences in mass of a Olds 98 and a Nash Rambler. I got hit head-on up there one time in my Nash Rambler on the Dewey Fisher Road, and it shook me up pretty good. So I can tell you, it's, from my own personal experience, it's dangerous.
Thank you.
Maybe I shouldn't have said dangerous.
It's more dangerous than most other roads. How's that?
All right, Chris?
I was just gonna point out that, yeah, between County Road 1 and County Road 23, the traffic counts are much higher on County Road 1 than they are north of Route 136.
Yes.
And the other argument I would make for doing County Road 1 as soon as possible is, Jeff already mentioned the substantial amount of right-of-way acquisition, and we're seeing, with the appreciation we're seeing in land prices, even willing sellers are gonna be getting a lot more money 5 years from now for that right-of-way than they're getting now. So the sooner the better. I think County Road 23, if I'm picturing that road correctly, other than in the village of Dewey, where you've got some homes along it, that's pretty wide open
yeah.
from the village of
There's
Dewey.
a few
north of
houses
the
out there.
Ford County line. Those are mostly big sections.
Right.
Any other questions? Anything else, Jeff?
That's it.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
your time.
much.
Thank you.
You got a big job out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Peterson has not made it in this evening. We're going to have Ms. Busey give us the budget report for the Champaign County Board of Health, and that would be our last item for the evening.
And Mr. James, who is your representative on the County Board of Health, can help with this because he was there when they approved this budget. Basically, in terms of revenue for this 13-month fiscal year, the Board of Health does have to deal with the issue of property tax. The property tax actually increases 3.6%, even though the levy's only going up 2.76%. Part of that is a result of redistribution of levy value between the areas inside CU Public Health District and then outside. So that's the explanation for that. All of the other revenues are projected to increase 8%, which is a reflection of the 13th month of expenditures, because all of the other permitting and fees revenues come in on a monthly basis as the expenditures go out. The CUPHD has proposed a contract which actually reflects a decrease in overall spending over the 2013 contract. The total contract budget is, I have trouble finding this. In professional services, it's $803,004 for the 13-month budget. That is directly correlating back to the permitting activities, to the grants that are received by the board, so it balances fairly well. The board also did agree to continue funding the Smile Healthy Child Dental Access Program. You will see that also reflects a 13-month budget at $48,750. The request you have in your packet from Smile Healthy is just their 12-month request, but it's been adjusted in the budget to reflect 13 months. So overall, this is a balanced budget within $200. The fund balance is not at the County Board of Health goal of 25%, but for fiscal 14, it is at almost 19%, which I would say is a fairly healthy fund balance for the operation of County Board of Health. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Gary?
Professional services are listed as $803,000 in this 13-month budget. I assume that's for personnel, or is that for contract out?
That is, the CUPHD, the County Board of Health contracts with the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District to completely administer all aspects of public health programs outside of the Champaign-Urbana area. So it's more than just personnel. It's all costs for providing services.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Astrid, microphone, please.
What does it mean, personnel formula?
The CUPHD also has a formula that they use to determine how much of their staff time is spent, because the same staff take care of programming both inside and outside of the CUPHD district. So they have a program for formula for determining that.
On my Deb, when I asked that question at budget, we were told that they really do log in and log out and really monitor their time.
Jeff was first, then John.
Just something I noted on the KPI side, again, is number 10. I noticed that they went from 50 projected food establishment, food safety education presentations to 244. Curious, that's probably a typo.
No, more people are eating out.
Oh, okay,
Well,
that's good.
it went from 15 one year to 50 the next, so I'm wondering if that's a new program that they're just
They were
ramping
bumping
up.
Okay,
I
fair
think
enough.
it is, and I think it has to do with the whole restaurant inspection issue that they're working on currently.
Okay, cool.
John?
On the revenue fund, from the Illinois Department of Health, the tobacco-free grants. Maybe, Stan, maybe you know this, maybe Deb, you know this. Aren't those grants, I mean, they only go out so far. Do you know the extent of which that money, because I think it's from tobacco company settlement, isn't it? How long are those grants going to be around?
I can't answer that, to be honest with you. Ever since I've been on the Board of Health, we've been receiving money. They're basically pass-through money. By us being a dual Board of Health and CU Public Health, each one gets its own separate grant, and that's what helps with us being a county. Without us being a dual sort of Board of Health, we wouldn't be getting those extra monies for grants. But I don't know when they'll end. They didn't give us a projection date on that. I'm sure they'll continue for some time because there's always money coming in.
Oh, Gary.
Thank you. I noticed also under item 7 of performance indicators that the projected inspections will be off about 10% next year compared to 2013, and wondered if that's a significant impact on our safety.
They have two number 7s. You're talking about food, the public health staff prepared this. You're talking about food establishment inspections?
That's correct.
Is that what it is, Patsy? The numbering's off? I was gonna say some restaurants closed, but you might be right.
No, I think the actual numbers that were provided by their staff are probably accurate. There probably are going to be fewer restaurants to be inspected. The numbering is that it looks like it should be number 8 instead of 7.
Oh, it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that.
All right, any more questions on this agenda tonight? All right, we're going to adjourn, and tomorrow night, 6 PM, we go for the next round. We're adjourned.